So hello everyone, I am Ishiwan from LBS Tech. We are trying to define social issues and solve these social issues. We are a startup, and today I would like to talk about some of the methodologies that we employ and also show you how we approach these social issues. We are going to look at social mapping, and this is a concept that I would like to cover today. So LBS Tech looks at physically challenged or visually impaired people, and we provide a platform for them. So they can use our platform and they can move through our platform. So they can move and order things through our platform. And in order to create this platform, we thought about cities. When you think about the cities that we know, it is not very accessible by those who have disabilities or who are physically challenged. So we want to create a city that is accessible. And if you can access a city, you can use that city, you can actually find satisfaction in that smart city. So the first thing that we thought about was accessibility. Of course, accessibility talks to the right of mobility. But for those who are physically challenged, they face a lot of difficulties. Especially if you look at those who are vulnerable in terms of using public transport, the physically challenged are not very satisfied with the public transportation system. And so if you look at the pedestrian environment or the public transportation system, it is not very favorable to the physically challenged. Of course, there are barriers, but with mobility services, there are other types of impediment or barriers to the visually impaired, such as the e-scooters. And so we want to think about these issues with them. We want to collect data from them to come up with solutions. So this issue is not something that we think about, but it's an issue that the government is also interested in. And the government is also coming up with safety measures and providing map services and information services for the physically challenged. But the services are implemented under the initiative of the government. They are used to information about cars, but they don't have a lot of information about pedestrian paths. Information on pedestrian paths is information that individuals hold, and there are limitations to this type of information that the government can acquire. So how can we collect this information and effectively respond? And so we try to come up with a solution to solve these issues. So we created a strategy to collect database through users, together with the users. And we joined our heads to come up with solutions. Experts and physically challenged people shared with us information about the challenges that face, what made their lives difficult. So the data that we collected was based on the experience of these people. So at the core of our activity are vulnerable people, physically challenged people, and these people, these users and citizens create the maps. And so that is why we created this initiative called Social Mapping. So here you can see there's a very simple application. And they take pictures of the barriers that they find. They take pictures of entrances. And we collect their information and also their experiences. So people just like to take pictures. But the physically challenged people not only take pictures, but share information regarding their experience with us. So here you can see volunteers and the elderly people. They're walking on the streets. They set routes, and they continue to update information on pedestrian paths. If you look at on the right-hand side, there are physically challenged people who are in wheelchairs. They try to measure speed, and they collect data regarding the environment that they are moving in. And on this slide, you can see that we traveled with those who have physically challenged, and we use AI to collect information. So as you can see here on the video, when the people with who are physically challenged move, our system detects what sort of barriers there are and which parts are less safe for these people to move. So here you can see a lot of pictures taken by people in wheelchairs. This is a pedestrian path, but you can see that there are so many obstacles on the pedestrian path. This is a reality of those people who are physically challenged. So how do we manage these pedestrian paths so that we can more systematically manage the pedestrian paths? So if you look at the travel route, you see a lot of obstacles. So we're not collecting just one day's worth of data from Monday to Sunday, from morning to noon to evening, we collect data. So there's a lot of different type of data regarding barriers on the pedestrian path. So we created a control system that not only collected data but looked at the experience of those people who are on the pedestrian path. The key to our activity was collecting data, and those people who collect the data are the users themselves, the people who are actually walking on the streets. So we use the GIS system. So Geography Information System, GIS data has been advanced through the user's experience, and we are able to distinguish and categorize people's experience. And we are trying to develop this technology, and we try to advance this technology. So the first thing I talked about was the user's pathway. There are two elements. The users actually walk on the streets, especially those who are visually impaired. Before they walk on the streets, they call their friends and get information. So 5 to 10 minutes, they talk on the phone, and with that information, they plan their route. So the experience of other people are very important. So collecting this information, I think, is an important first step in providing our services. So through the system, we collect information on people's travel route. In the past, we would install the smartphone on the wheelchair and try to measure the tremors on the streets, try to collect information about the surrounding environment. But we don't do this on just a one-time basis. We do this repeatedly, and through our control system, we are able to collect information on the experience of the users, and we can in a more advanced manner collect this information and systemize it. So we analyze the images, we analyze the videos, and based on the image and videos, we are able to rate and categorize the different pedestrian paths. So through this, we are able to identify the best insight. So here on the screen, you can see the insight that we derived with our experiences. There's a lot of riders, MMS systems. You can scan the streets. So with fixed information, you can get information on fixed objects. But what is more difficult is this situational information. So maybe there might be a signage in front of the store, or maybe there is an e-scooter left on the street. So on the pedestrian path, there might be garbage, or there might be furniture. So there are all these unpredictable objects on the streets, and these are important variables for our users. Especially when the weather becomes cold, there's ice on the street, and sometimes there's water puddles. So all of these are barriers to the right to mobility.
이런 기준을 만들게 됩니다.
So these have become our standards in terms of collecting information. Of course, there are technical limitations. The environmental information, for example, heat on the streets or the ice on the street.
보행로에 있는 결빙 상태를 정확하게 예측할
We
수
cannot
없습니다.
accurately
하지만
predict this on the
그분들이
pedestrian
직접
path.
사진을 찍고
But when
위험하다고
users
하는
take
걸 올려줬을 때는
pictures and they
기술이
tell
아닌
us that it is
자기가 경험으로도
dangerous,
충분히
then
이
it
단계를
doesn't
커버할 수
have to be
있고
very accurate
경험의
advanced
공유만으로도
technology. Just
충분히
by
가치 있는
sharing their
정보들을 수집할 수
experiences,
있다는 걸
we're
알게
able
되면서
to collect
저희는
meaningful
장애물들을
data.
크게 두 가지
So we have
형태
two
장애물과
obstacles.
상황 장애물,
We
그리고
have
상황 장애물을
situational
사람에
obstacles
의해서
and we
나오는
have
인적인 요소,
artificial
환경에서 나오는
obstacles.
환경의 요소로
So artificial
구분을
obstacles
시키셔야 합니다.
are obstacles
그렇게 해서
placed by
나온
people,
지도가
and
레이어를 이루게 되고
situational
시설 위에
or environment
보행의 장애물,
objects
위험 요소 등을
are
표시해서
objects that are
가장
created through
직관적이고
natural
필요한
environment.
부분들을 볼 수 있는 레이어 형태로
So we have
정보들을
different layers of
제공하고
information
제공하게 됩니다.
that we process to provide to
그렇게 해서
our
만들어낸
users.
관제 시스템은
And so this
단순히
control
저희
system
혼자
that
쓰는
we
게 아닌
create is not
여러
just
가지
used by
형태로
us, but
API
it
형태나
is
또는
provided
표준
through
형태로 만들어서
API,
여러
and
기관들과
through
공유를
different
하게 되고
formats we share
물론 그
this
공유가
information with other
표준과
institutions,
순차적인
and by
문제를
sharing
해결할
this
수 있는
information we can
종래의
standardize the
그리고
information
하나의
and also try to
과정이고
solve
결과가 되지
social
않을까라는 생각으로 노력을
issues,
하고
and I think we are in the process right now
보시는
of
화면이
doing that.
저희가 만들어낸
So here you can see
인터페이스예요.
the interface that we created on the
저는
screen,
사회적으로
and I
이런
thought
이동권이나
that
기본권에
the
관련된
right to
접근을 할 때는
mobility, this right to
한 번에 다
access
해결하려고
different facilities,
시각장애용으로
we want
인터페이스를
to
만들고
solve it,
장애용으로 인터페이스를 만들
and we
수는
can create
있으나
interface for the
결국은
visually impaired or the
인터페이스
physically
하나만으로 되는 것도
challenged,
아니고
but the interface in
데이터,
itself is not
정보를
enough.
얼마나
We need
잘
to have
신속하게
information,
시민성과
and we need
지속성을
to
가지고 있느냐도
continuously
문제라고
and
생각했습니다.
quickly provide this
그래서 저희는
information to the
철저하게
user. So from the get-go, we looked at
데이터베이스 두
interface
가지를
and
통해서
database.
업데이트 주기,
And we looked
방법,
at
기준
the way,
등을 통해서
frequency, the
정말
way
장애물을 쓸 수 있는
we
또는
update
쓸만한
information,
시스템을
and we
만들기
try to
위해서
create a
노력하고
system
있습니다.
that was usable and meaningful
그런 것
to
같습니다.
our
사회 문제
users.
전반적으로 보게 되면
So if you look at the
사회
overall
문제
social
하나를
issues, if you
해결한다
try
그래서 해결이
to
되는 것도 있겠으나
Of course, you can solve a
요즘
social
보면 이런 게
issue, but I
있었습니다.
think what we find these days is that for the visually impaired people, they need a lot of tactile blocks, and of course you want to have tactile blocks on all of the pedestrian paths. But for some people, maybe the tactile blocks are an impediment to some people. So maybe people who are in wheelchairs don't like the tactile blocks. It makes their movement more difficult. So social issue is not just addressing one side of the problem. You have to look at the different elements. You have to look at the different stakeholders. So ensuring the right to mobility is about collecting information about the pedestrian path. And we're not just providing this information to visually impaired or physically challenged people. We should be able to provide this information to many different types of people in order for our system to expand and to be sustainable. So the data that we produced and collected is used by the physically challenged, and then we get feedback. And then we can create a user participatory map. So if one person continues to make, it's not just about one person making the system and another person using the system. Social mapping is about a participatory system where citizens participate in the system and they can contribute to solving the issues. So here you can see a city. It's an approachable city. So approachable city should be a city that people can use the different services, and when people utilize the different services, then it can become a smart city that people find satisfaction. So smart city is not just about obsessing about technology. So it's not this far-off dream of creating this wonderful city. It's about a city that is inclusive, a city that promotes reconnection. So when I was looking at this slide, one thing that came across me was that visually impaired or physically challenged people, we tell them, what do you think about smart city? And I think one of the things that we heard
일단
from
스마트
them
시티는
is
잘
that
모르겠는데
I don't really know
지금의
about
이런
smart
도시조차
city, but even the
접근하기가 너무
city
힘들다.
right now, we cannot access the
말을
city.
들었을 때
And so actually,
오히려
it was very
지금
heartbreaking
우리가 가고
to
있는
hear
속도는
this.
가장 앞에
So
가장 빠른
maybe
사람의 속도가 아니라 가장 나중에
we
오거나 늦게
should
오신 분들의
look
속도를
at
맞춰야 그게
not
도시의
just looking at the
속도구나라는
people who
생각을
are
하게
in the
되고
front, but we should
그분들의
look at
속도로
the
문제를
people
보고
who are trying to
그분들과
keep up with
함께
others who
문제를
are
풀어가고 있다고
moving
생각합니다.
very quickly. So I
이런
think we need
편견을 도시를
to
통해서
solve
저희는
social
시각
issues
장애인을
with them.
시작으로 지질
So
장애
we're
그리고
looking at visually
동네에
impaired
있는
people, physically challenged people,
고령자분들까지
elderly
종합적으로
citizens.
어우르는
We
그런
want our
프로젝트를 하기 위해서
system to embrace all these
사업의
different
전략도
type of
만들고 있습니다.
citizens, and we are coming up
처음에
with
제가
strategies to expand our services and
고령자분들이나
systems.
사용약자분들을
So
위한
the vulnerable
시스템을
people,
만든다고
the
했을
elderly
때
citizens,
저희한테
they
이런
are
질문을 하더라고요.
also part of our system.
모든 사람이 다 만족한다는
And
건 오히려
someone
모든
said
사람이 다
to me that if you
만족하지 못한다
try
일
to
수도
satisfy
있다.
everyone, you might not be
그래서
satisfy
저희는
even
반대로
one
그러면
person.
가장
So we
중요한
thought
가장
that on
어려운
the flip side,
정보를 쓸 때 가장 어려운 사람이
who is
누굴까라고
the
생각을
person that
했고
has the most
그래서
difficulty
저희는
in
시각
using
장애인으로
information,
잡았고요.
and
이
that
시각
was
장애인이라고
visually
하는
impaired
부분을
people. So
해결함으로써
we thought that if we
조금
can
더
address the issues
정보를 쉽게 제공할
faced
수
by
있는
the
지체
visually
그리고
impaired
고령까지도
people,
넘어가고
then
있는
we will be
전략을
able to
취하고
expand
있다고
our
생각합니다.
services to include physically challenged and the elderly citizens.
정답을 갖고 있는 회사는
Our
아니라고
company
생각합니다.
does not
수많은
have
길 중에
the right
하나를 갖고 있는
answers
회사이긴
to all the
하지만
questions. We are
결론은
just
그 수많은
exploring
길 중에
one
하나가 또 다른
option or
경험으로서
one
공유되고
solution.
오늘처럼
And
발표할 수 있는 기회도 생기지 않았나라는
I
생각을
think
합니다.
that we
저희가
are trying
만들었던
to
시각 지체
the
장애인분들의
system that we
이동권 관련된
created
영상을 잠깐
for
보면서
the
마무리
visually
멘트를
impaired
해보도록
people and the physically challenged people. I will show you through a video.
네. 보시는 것처럼
So as
저희 회사에
you just saw, that was a video about our company. And when we first, people started talking about our company, they thought that you're not going to make a lot of money with your business. And they say, why are you doing this? And there was a conviction that I had. If we can create information that visually impaired people can use, we thought everybody else could use that information quite easily. And if we can create a pedestrian path information for the physically challenged, then we thought the elderly people or people who need this type of information would be able to easily utilize our information. So we have a delivery robot project. So it's an autonomous delivery robot. And what this robot needs is information regarding the pedestrian path. So up until now, we focused on the roads for cars, and we never really had a lot of interest in or information about pedestrian path and how the data is collected, produced, and processed. But because we are creating information for physically challenged people and visually impaired people, we have a lot of information about, the roads and streets. And this inclusion of embracing the physically challenged and visually impaired people actually turned out to provide more business opportunities for us. So technology is, I think, can embrace everyone. So we're embracing the visually impaired people and also the physically challenged people. And I hope that my presentation today provides inspiration to those of you who are trying to solve social issues through design. Thank you.